NWP Radio.
You're listening to NWP Radio, a production of the National Writing Project.
NWP. NWP Radio.
Hello, hello, hello. It's a true pleasure to bring 2023 to you all again. Well, not again. It's the first time we've hit 2023. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the National Writing Project's The Right Time, the show that features the authors of books we love to read and teach and the educators who thrive on teaching them. My name is Brian Ripley Crandall, and I'm thrilled to be with several individuals tonight who are VIP to me in NWP and my family, including my co-host, the woman with 8 tentacles that she is always moving in multiple directions, Miss Tonya Baker. What hopes do you have for the new year, Tonya? Weren't we just partying together like it was 1999?
We were indeed. What is NCTE for, if not to party like it's 1999 every year? Hi, Brian. Welcome back. And yes, I try. Hope is a practice, and I try to practice it. And I think for 2023, I am hopeful that in this country and in the world, we remember that while one book might be harmful, having access to all the books can only make us better. I hope we will remember that, because I feel like we've lost track. Like you, I'm so excited to have so many beautiful people from our network with us tonight to offer a holiday episode of The Right Time. This time, we want to share a resource that every educator should have. It's the winner of the 2022 Excellence in Equity Award for Best Book for Educators. The book's title is Teaching for Racial Equity, Becoming Interrupters. And all 3 of its authors, Tonya Perry, Steve Zemelman, and Katy Smith, are with us tonight. Many of us across the network have benefited from their brilliance. They have presented at NCTE and Urban Sites Network conferences and in the Teacher Studio. Last March, when the book debuted, Brian quickly said we have to have them on the show. And he also named 2 stellar teacher leaders from the Red Mountain Writing Project to join them. So we are so happy to have Tonya Perry, Steve Zemelman, Katy Smith, Jamika Thomas, and Sanjanika Henderson Green with us on the show. It's great to see you all together tonight.
I get the pleasure of introducing the stellar, wonderful writers that are with us tonight. But first, I just want to read a couple comments from scholars across the United States. Richard Milner writes, teachers are far more than mere transmitters of subject matters. Rather, teachers are and should be interrupters of inequity in the fight for social justice. Linda Christensen, she also writes, this is a book for every classroom, school, department, district, and educational institution that claims to put equity at the center of its work. For me, the authors challenge us to act professionally, to listen to one another, and to participate in a community to build equity for all. It's a stellar blueprint to follow. Dr. Tonya Perry is the director of the Red Mountain Writing Project in Birmingham, Alabama. She also is the vice provost of Miles College and HBCU and co-author of Teaching for Racial Equity, Becoming Interrupters. She is the vice president of NCTE. Woot! Her favorite pastime is writing and spending time with family and friends. Katy Smith, who is also with us, is the chair of the Department of Educational Inquiry and Curriculum Studies and the director of the Graduate Studies of Northeastern Illinois University in Chicago. She began her association with the Illinois Writing Project as a teacher consultant while she was teaching high school students, and now directs the IWP with Steve Zemelman. Dr. Stephen Zemelman is a visiting scholar at Northeastern Illinois University and a founding director of the Illinois Writing Project. He promotes student civic engagement and restorative justice in Chicago schools. Woo-woo. His books on teaching, writing, and reading have long been widely appreciated, including the Best Practice, Bringing Standards to Life to America's Classrooms with Harvey Daniels and Arthur Hyde, and From Inquiry to Action, Civic Engagement with Project-Based Learning. Now for the incredible teachers. Tonya?
First, I owe 2 of our authors, well, especially just mostly Katy, an apology, because I was so taken up listening to all those kind words, I forgot to advance the slide. So Katy kind of zoomed by on her bio, but the words were spoken. Despite being transfixed and not doing my host jobs, I am really excited about this episode and the opportunity to introduce two of my favorite educators. Dr. Jamika Thomas is a veteran educator who's devoted her professional career to K-12 education. She's also a professional development consultant for the National Writing Project and the Red Mountain Writing Project. Dr. Thomas has been a leader of leaders for many years and currently serves as the Director of Curriculum and Instruction. Her mission is to mentor and lead teachers and students to academic success and personal growth. Sanjanika Henderson Green is a veteran educator who's dedicated herself to professionally to serving secondary scholars. She's currently serving as an instructional coach for middle school in a large urban school district. Additionally, Sanjanika is a professional development consultant and co-facilitator of the Summer Institute for the Red Mountain Writing Project. It is her mission to help teachers continually delve into the purpose of their instruction and to reflect on its effectiveness. She is married and has one son who's 20 years old. All right. Jamika and Sanjanika, I'm turning the show over to you. I know you're going to start by offering us a writing prompt. Those who are listening or watching online can pause their show if they want to actually stop and write now before the interview. Jamika, over to you.
Thank you, Tonya. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Tonya and Brian. So tonight we start with a writing prompt, and it is partially on the screen. In the foreword of the book, a poem by Yolanda Seeley Ruiz appears on page XXI, which is 21. It reads in its entirety: racial literacy incite the change and bring the nation to the tipping point of what is professed long ago, before you or I came to be. Racial literacy is a practice. It probes the existence of racism and examines the effects of its damage on our experiences. Racial literates have the skill to discuss and dismantle centuries-old lies of superiority. Think of someone who has shown up in your space and place, or someone who you have seen on TV or social media that embodies the characteristics of being racially literate. At this time, we can pause.
Perfect. Thank you, Jamika. I would probably name somebody on this panel if I were doing this writing, and maybe I'll do that as I listen to you talk. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and stop my video. Brian and I will leave you to what I'm sure is going to be an excellent conversation. Thank you.
Well, good evening to Katy and Tonya and Steve. Myself and Sanjanika, we're so excited to be able to interview you all this evening. We're privileged. We know you all personally, but to be able to do this with you all is such an extreme joy. So we're going to start off with our first question, and it really starts in the introduction. It says, in the introduction, you acknowledge teacher and student writers. In the introduction, you acknowledge teacher and student writers. Why was it important to include them as writers in the book, and what unique perspectives did they bring?
Oh,
Who would like to go first?
I love that question because I think it is central to the design and the thought process and all the conversations that Tonya and Steve and I had over the time that we worked on this book. We have perspectives, and collectively we have a lot of experiences, but there's nothing that is quite as important as the experience of the classroom teachers who are on the ground doing the current day-to-day work, and most importantly, the young people. And so few books for educators center the voices of teachers and of students that we just felt that was absolutely crucial for this book.
Totally agree. I totally agree. Thank you all for being here. I'm excited to hear your perspective. And you're so right, Katy, like teachers who are right there and the voices of the children, that was so powerful for me as I read those children's stories. And I was like, wow, this was so genius for you all to include that. So I want to ask, ask about another section that we were really intrigued by as we were discussing how we would move forward with our questioning. And we thought about the different segments of the time to talk. They were so interesting. So I have a question for you about that. After the introduction to the book, there begins a series of small but significant sections called Time Out to Talk. Why was it essential to include this in your book? Whoever wants to jump in and talk about it.
I'll take that one. You know, time to talk is actually, well, the times in the book that are named Time to Talk are some of the most interesting pieces of the book. I think, now, don't get me wrong, I think the whole book is very interesting. Okay. Don't get me wrong. But we wanted to model what it meant to actually have difficult conversations, right? And what it meant to build relationships, what that looks like, what that sounds like, and how it's important for us as teachers, as educators, and students to make space for that. So that's what we did. We make space for it. And I can remember the first Time to Talk talks about, it's between Steve and myself, when we have a conversation about why did he ask me to write this book with him? And I can remember the day I even asked that question to him, and we had an honest conversation, you know, and began to really unpack and think about why we do what we do, you know, and then to be honest with each other about what that work looks like, and wanted to model that conversation. We didn't want this book to be something that was perfect, because when you talk about race and you talk about difficult conversations, it's not perfect. And you're going to have these pitfalls and these ups and downs. And we really wanted to model that in this text. Steve, did you have anything you wanted to add? Or Katy?
Well, yeah, I wanted to just add that it's not like we said, oh, we've got to have these conversations, so let's have some and put them in the book. Right. They were real. Tonya Perry asked me that. And it was like, oh my gosh, what do I say to her? You know, what is the honest truth here? And can I really say that? And so they actually happened. And then we decided, you know what? Our experience does reflect what we're asking people to do. And rather than be the people on high who know it all, we're going to show you that we struggle the way we know you may have to struggle. So don't think we're any better. It's a journey that we're all on.
Yeah, I found them. I was so intrigued by them. I read them like a couple times because I was so intrigued by the authenticity of those conversations along the way. It was so transparent, and it just really, really seemed like real live work continuously.
I will never forget that first one, believe me.
And, you know, one of the things that we truly have, we've been on Zoom once a week for 3 years, at least at this point, right? And so often we recorded those Zoom conversations. And so those Time Out to Talk segments are things that came right out of the actual work of the book. So no, they weren't created. They were our lived experience with this.
Oh, I could hear the tone, and I could hear your voices, and it was genuine questioning. I mean, it was genuine modeling of thinking through a situation. And I loved it so much for its authenticity. So thank you all for including that in the book. Jamika?
So this work is difficult, right? It takes a lot of honesty. It takes a lot of reflection. And to do that, you need something that really anchors you to process. And so we noticed that one of the frameworks that you use is a new framework that Yolanda C. Ruiz has developed called Racial Literacy Development. How did that influence your work with this book?
Wow. You know, that's an excellent question. And we talked about the racial literacy model development model. We tossed it around, but after we had gone through it, we thought this would be a really good anchor for the text. And it's a really good anchor for the text because I think all three of us agree that critical love, which is a foundation, I would believe, for her work, is a foundation of our work.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think that there are times in life where people think that they're making a difference or they're impacting racial literacy in positive ways. But the question is it a foundation in critical love? If what you are doing is not impactful and based in love and it's harmful, it causes some harm, then you have to think this might not be something that's grounded and helpful to our racial literacy development. Right? It's got to be where it doesn't harm, and it really does. It's based on critical love, and then it goes up to the other layers and goes, and it's recursive. It doesn't have to be just layered. But to be a good interrupter, you do want a solid foundation in critical love. And I know that my colleagues may want to comment. If I keep asking them to comment, we won't get through probably all your questions, but I think it's important that we do a reasonable job with the questions that we have. So please, Katy, did you want to add anything?
I've really appreciated that in the communications that we had with Yolanda, she emphasizes that this is not linear, that this is, it's more complicated than that. But of course, you know, with words, we can only put them in a certain order, right? So there's got to be some order to it. I've also appreciated that thinking about the different layers to do some introspection and some self-examination of, okay, where are some places that I feel like I'm pretty strong and pretty knowledgeable, and where are places that I need to grow, you know, that I need to do the work to be more competent and more effective in this area or that area. But as Tonya said, always on that foundation of critical love. And teachers don't go into this work because we don't like kids. We go into this work because we love kids and we love learning and we love knowledge and we love reading and writing. And so how do we take that foundation of our love for our children and make sure that we're doing the very best that we can?
I would just add that it isn't just liking your kids. It's a deep caring about their future, about who they are as people, about what they bring to the classroom. And the other quick thing I want to say is that not just critical love, but all of the pieces in that framework are things that if you are going to try to make change in your school, you need to do with yourself. That gives you the base to be able to do it. And without that, you may make, mistakes and missteps that you don't even realize are happening. And it helps you to be oriented so you think carefully. Boy, humility is a big one for me. So many things I realized that I really didn't know and understand. And I'm still not all the way there, but it's a process.
It is. It is. And I've enjoyed reading about the process. And so I just want to continue this conversation because Dr. Perry, you mentioned something about, I think you just mentioned something about interrupters. And so I just want to continue that conversation because during NCTE, I heard you, and several of us heard you begin to explain the difference between a disruptor and an interrupter. And I found that so intriguing. And so will you share the difference between a disruptor and an interrupter? Because I think that's vital for the audience to know.
I think that's you, Steve.
Well, I'll start, but I think Tonya and Katy should speak too, because it happened that I wasn't able to go to NCTE, even though I've shared a lot of that thinking. And words are powerful, and there are times disrupt sounds more maybe conflictual or more kind of really turning the tables over. And there are times when that's really necessary. We can't say, oh, we've all got to just be nice all the time. But Tonya nods her head. But interruption for me, and we'll see how Tonya views it, is it's more dialogue, more dialogical. It's more kind of, wait a minute, we need to talk about this. We need to think about what this means and whether we're really doing discipline, for example, in a way that's really meaningful for children's growth. So we thought that that was a better word. But I would say that, people like the folks who developed disrupt text, they didn't mean to just throw the text out. So they were using disrupt actually in a softer sense of bringing other text to it or substituting. So people use these words differently. And we just thought this would help focus people on a thoughtful interruption.
I was thinking that interruption also is something you can do quite often, right? You can interrupt something, you can stop someone's thinking, or you can redirect. Disruption usually can't occur as often just because it's more of a stop, but it's not an either or, it is an and. We need to interrupt and disrupt, and so we can on a daily basis have these conversations where we ask people, can you rethink that? Did you really mean to say it that way? Because this is how I took this. Or what did that word mean when you said that? Did you know that that's how I felt a certain way when you said that word? Those are interruption phrases that we can use, and all of us can put those in place. So I think that there's interruption and there's disruption, but we can constantly interrupt and redirect in ways that pause people's thinking, right? So that they can come back to it. Katie, did you want to add?
I don't think there's anything to add. I think you two have said all the things that we've been saying together for a while. So
thank you so much for explaining that, because both are important when you're having critical conversations and when you are doing this kind of work. We need to be able to disrupt and interrupt what's happening. So thank you all for explaining those. Jamika.
It really leads us into our next question. When you interrupt and disrupt spaces, how do you believe, or what is your expectation of the transformation that will happen after an interruption or a disruption? What do you think the outcomes will be?
Well, clearly our hope and expectation is that there will be positive change for greater equity. Through the work of the book, I think we all are hoping that we have provided the models that we've talked about, that we've provided some guidance that will help educators and young people to listen more carefully to one another, to make sure that the things that they are doing create greater space for expression, right? Let's see if I can express, right? To express their ideas and use their voices. One of the things that we've talked about is we don't need to empower students. They have power. We need to allow them the space and create the space to use that power, right? And to use that voice. And so I think that's a hope. Colleagues, what else would we want to add?
I put to you, Steve.
Well, there are many different levels of change because race penetrates schools and life in general in so many different ways. Sometimes I've had in our Illinois Writing Project Equity Committee, people saying, where do we even start, And it's like, well, pick one, pick a card, any card, and we'll get started. And so there may be changes that are at a policy level, like what should discipline look like in our school. There may be changes that are more classroom level. There may be changes that are much larger. I mean, one of the things that's traced in one of the appendix in the book is how much inequity is in the funding of schools, and the districts right next to each other have such different levels of funding, inequitable levels for the people of color. And that has not changed. In fact, there was just a new report that I saw on the web the other day that's still gone the same as ever. And it's kind of a cycle that's very hard to break. You'd almost have to work at the state level to get somewhere with that, so that funding was more equal. So, you know, there are lots of changes that have got to be made. Some have to be out in the community. With when Tonya spoke of the kind of attitudes and anger and feelings that are in the community now that are turning against schools and school boards, that's change that's got to happen in sort of really educators connecting more with the community to help them to express their concerns more constructively, for example. That's a different, and there's a lot of doing.
That really hits home for me by me being a director of curriculum and instruction, you know, at a district level, and understanding the intricacies in the systems that are embedded within curriculum, within what teachers teach and what students learn and how they do it. And the old way has not helped us. So this another way needs to form, and to understand that some of it is based in things that are ugly, you know, as far as inequity, that we just took as status quo. And so that takes a lot of brain power and heart and perseverance to really make that transformation. So to look at it from as small as teacher-student conversations to as large as inequity of funding between districts. I think that if people take this text, they can really see that they can pick any card and get to work, right?
Yeah. So good, so good, so true. You mentioned, Steve, you mentioned about the appendix, which Jamaica and I were just blown away.
Yes.
Oh my God. Full of so much. Okay, so the appendix is just so comprehensive, just so comprehensive. Why did you all decide to do an appendix that comprehensive in this text?
Well, I since I worked a lot on it, I guess I'll start with this one. I want to hear from my partners. You know, there are 4 appendices, and they each do a different job. One is the forebears and present educators and writers without whom we couldn't have done this. And that was one way we could acknowledge that, just by listing as many as we could. And I'm sure we forgot a few, and I hope they're not insulted. So that was one part. Another is the books that they've written, and that was separate. With little annotations. So if teachers, one little book like ours can't do the whole job. So if people want to go elsewhere, where do they go? And so we put little annotations on them too, so they could make their choice. Then there are all these wonderful resources. And actually that was started by one of our contributing teachers, Vanessa Heller. And we thought, let's put this together and make it really useful with QR codes so people could go right there. And then the 4th one was all of the data on inequities in education. And that originally was a chapter early on. And then we thought it was so depressing, we couldn't put it there. We couldn't have people stop and really get discouraged. So we put it at the end. But it's a resource because there are people that'll say to teachers, well, all of that racial stuff, that's in the past. Aren't things better now? You know, this isn't systemic. You know, why do we have to do this? This gives them some ammunition. But by the way, it's now 2 years old plus, because of how long it takes to create a book. And there's been so much more since. And I collect those articles, but there's so many, I can't even sort them out anymore. So, but I'd be interested in my partner's thoughts on those too.
What to you, Katy?
Yeah, I mean, we do want to acknowledge Vanessa for organizing the resources for classroom teachers, and having the idea that we should do QR codes. So it's like, okay, that's a good idea. And one of the things that because of the nature of publishing, I mean, one of the things that we will be continuing to do, we've got 2 blog posts out now, and we will continue that will provide some opportunities for continuing to update and provide new resources or new information for readers.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And it's not directly related to the conversation, but indirectly. The appendices has also spurred, us to continue thinking about future work, how this can continue to be relevant in classrooms, which will go into the blog and any other resources that we develop for teachers and students and other educators. One that I'm working on right now is with the national board, and we're looking at diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. The idea that inclusiveness is not enough. It's almost like I'm inviting you to dinner, but I might not talk to you at the table. Well, if you really want to make a change, you have to be committed to inclusion and belonging. It's not enough to just invite somebody. You got to make sure they understand that they do belong. So that's furthering the work. And the 3 of us continue to talk about different ways. Katy continues to challenge us, and also thinking about how we can develop in teacher education. Steve is what I call our archivist, and he collects different articles and brings to us new ways in which people are thinking about this work. And so, we're just a team of colleagues who are committed to doing this, so that the appendices is ever growing in our minds, and always through this evolution, right? This is creating, it's not flat, it's a dynamic. The thing is that the book can't grow, but the resources that we have that are connected to it will continue to grow. And so even our Facebook, we have a Facebook group that hopefully in 23 we'll be able to make a little bit more active, but continue to do some of this dialogue, but just, it's good work.
It is good work. It is so good. And just thank you all for starting those conversations with the book, and then attaching all of that in those appendices. Like, it's just wow. Like you all have said, if a person doesn't know where to start, you all have done an amazing job of giving them a place to start. So thank you so much for that. It is really fantastic. Jamika.
In closing, this work has proven to be life-changing to others. How has it changed your lives, professionally and personally, since you have written this book?
Katy, why don't you start?
Yeah, I'll start and maybe start small. Like, since is the wrong word for me, since you have written this book, because the process of writing the book, it has been one of the most life-altering experiences that I've had.
Yeah.
And I've been very fortunate in my teaching career and in my university career to have wonderful colleagues and some wonderful teams that I've worked with. All that said, to build from those experiences to this experience where, if when the week goes by and we haven't Zoomed on Wednesday afternoon at 3:00, it feels odd. it feels odd to know that I have among my various colleagues and partners, 2 particular partners that I can think carefully with every regularly every week, that we can think together and talk together and puzzle over concerns in very open and honest ways. I hope that anybody who reads the book finds partners like that.
Wow.
And I second all of that. And I would say, for one thing, I've written a lot for education, and I'm proud of all of it. Some is better than others, though. But this tops it all. There's nothing that's been as important or meaningful for me as this. And I'm an older guy. I'm going to be 84 next month. And
Wow.
to be
Happy
learning
early
so
birthday.
much new, thank you, at this stage of my life is very special. And then the other thing is, these are friendships, not only us three, but the contributed teacher writers as well. These are friendships. I mean, we talk about and support each other in our lives. It's been very important in those weekly Zooms that we don't just do business. We care about each other, and we've each had struggles that we've dealt with, and we support each other. And that matters so much to me. I have friends, I have professional friends, I have personal friends, but this is like both, and it's so rich. Even though the topic is so troubling, it's kind of ironic.
Yeah, but we have the conversations have been honest and real, and not always easy. I remember one time I said, Steve, you need to do such and such. And he said, no, that's not me. I said, what do you mean that's not you? He said, I'm not going to write that because that's not me. And I said, well, that's what I think, and he was like, well, that's not what I think, right? That's not me. So the conversations are real, are honest, and even revealing about yourself, and your own ways in which you see the world. Sometimes you take for granted that your way is how everybody else sees it, and it's not. Right?
Or the limits to that seeing the world.
Yes, absolutely. And so it's been an amazing time, and I just want to publicly thank my partners for putting up with me. Because there are lots of things that ways that I see the world or think, and even just how life happens, right? How life happens. And I want to just publicly thank them for, their ability to, maneuver and be open. This all really starts with having a certain level of openness. And being able to have these conversations, and even if you don't agree, at least you're willing to be open and listen to what another perspective might be. How often do we shut down conversations with our students or with other adults because we believe what they're going to say is something that we don't believe, therefore we don't want to hear it. And I just think that the world would be such a better place if we at least started with openness, even if it hurts you. At least start with the ability to listen, and then you'll be able to move past some of these other things. Well, I see our parents are back.
Well, let me just quickly add, that takes relationship. It builds relationship and trust. And that's what teachers are going to need with each other if they're going to do the work.
Yeah, Tonya and I came back in and like we've been texting throughout this entire conversation. And I want to stop and pause for a second and say, if you're listening or if you're watching this, look at the 5 individuals that were in conversation with each other. Look them up, contact them if you can. So much of this is just about knowledge and lived experience. It's just about understanding not only the local and the national histories of this nation, but the global history of our world. We've been in this conundrum for so long, hundreds and hundreds of years, especially those of us now in these K-12 schools, where the storytelling and the narrations and the curriculum and the measurements, they've been so homogeneous and lopsided. There's so much to be learned from simply listening Listening is so much at the core of it all. I'm just so thankful for almost a decade of learning from the Red Mountain Writing Project. The wisdom they host and hold, my God, it's immeasurable. We should just make questioning and inquiry central to the work that we do. And I know Steve does that. Question, ask, inquiry, wonder, right? But wait, I also think this is the National Writing Project way, and why so many of us on this show are in agreement, and so many of us exist as we do. So more now than ever before in my life, I feel like we need to coach and guide the importance of questioning and finding answers, rather than being told that these answers are what we are measuring. It's bonkers, right? And with that, I'm going to step off my little soapbox because I was thinking about this and I had to get it off my chest. This was a beautiful show for a beautiful book with a beautiful crew talking about it. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart for being who you are. Tonya? He's on mute.
You had one job, which was to let Jamika and Sanjanika have their
final prompt.
Their final prompt.
I failed because I was on my
soapbox. Share their final prompt.
It's a good one too.
All right. So it's been such a rich conversation. I hate for it to end, but if we do have to end, we don't want us as people who are still the hands and feet who touch children and the people who are watching to forget about these things. So I want you to think about this and ponder and write if you would like. So just understanding the weight of this work, we've talked about that throughout this conversation. How will you, as interrupters, celebrate the successes and creativity of yourself, your students, and your communities? If you'd like to write, please take that time.
Thank you, Sanjanika. It means I get to have the last word, and my last word, as always in all of my work in the writing project, and particularly with this community of people, is thank you. Thank you, Tonya, Steve, and Katy, for this beautiful book, and congratulations. I hope you're all celebrating the success of the book and the awards it's winning and the words that it's the words of celebration that it's receiving. I want to thank you, Sanjanika and Jamika, for having those great questions that really made space for a lovely conversation where we could both hear about the book, but also get a sense of how it was put together and the relationships that are behind and underneath it. And my last job always is to thank you, listeners. We're really glad you're here. We hope that you have immediately gone to Bookshop and ordered this book. We hope also that you stay with us in our community, because we do believe that everyone on the show is a member of a writing project site and a member of the national community. And we really believe that these important conversations can happen here. And that it's a space where a lot of people, I'm going to keep this in mind, Steve, are willing to pick a card, any card, and just get started on the problems of practice that face us in education today. So if you aren't already a part of the National Writing Project, please go to our website, nwp.org, and sign up for the Right Now newsletter, where you will hear all about upcoming opportunities to join conversations or to hear shows like this one. We have a community space called the Right Now Teacher Studio at studio.nwp.org, and there you can engage in conversation with teachers, these teachers and other teachers like them who are really trying every day to show up and listen and ask the hard questions. And if you want to find this show and others like it, you can find NWP Radio. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, panel of colleagues and friends. I'm so glad to have spent these.
Radio.
You're listening to NWP Radio, a production of the National Writing Project.
NWP. NWP Radio.